Just want to see if there are a couple of other voices that want to be plebeian lecturers. Just for a moment, is there another voice that wants to add to what we hear before it goes to small groups?
Goes to seed.
Who think, we're the show.
You never fail to interest me, for sure. But I ran across a guy named Gil Penaloza who you would really like. He runs an organization called 8 to 80. He says if you want to know how your neighborhood's doing, how your citizens doing, you take a child that's 8 or under that you love, or an adult that's 80 or over that you love, and you can let them loose on the streets and they're safe. That's how you know you got it right.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
That's a gem.
So what is the problem with this taxonomy of the plebeian protocol?
I don't know what that means.
She's determined.
Well, the thing that's good about the plebeian protocol is that it has an ambivalent origin. People are both ashamed and proud of being plebeians. And if you call somebody a plebeian from an aristocratic point of view, that's a put down. But if you call somebody a plebeian who is a plebeian, they see that as a compliment, or at least a neutral statement. And the history of that term, the plebeian is always set opposite either the aristocrat or the communist leadership, or somebody who is credentialed in some special way of knowing that renders the plebeian or the people's values less than. And so to make of plebeian values of virtue is that you're making the values of the people in the community primary. And you're also signaling that that is uncomfortable for a large number of specialized people.
For the credentialed people.
The credentialed people. And I think that's part of why it's an attractive term, because it isn't, the word people, it got kind of marxed into craziness. And the plebeian is closer to a search for community rather than a search for an alternative power system.
Oh, that's so good.
So I think that
It is. It's an alternative, community is an alternative revolution, isn't it?
Yeah, and so like when you look at the plebeian leaders of history, like Gandhi and Lech Walesa and Solzhenitsyn,
Exactly.
these are all people who come from the grassroots, who find their power in their identification with people who had been excluded from the power structure. And they had to invent new idioms for power, like nonviolence, solidarity, or Solzhenitsyn's term, what was his great phrase? The solidarity of solitudes.
Solitudes.
Solitudes, which he discovered in the Gulag prison camps, that there was a whole generation of people who had been weaned off Marxism by the penal institution. And so we're ready for a kind of reframing of history. And that didn't come from the elites re-educating them. That came from them suffering through the illogic of a system. So then when they spoke up out of their own experience, it was intuitive, organic, and revolutionary. But the problem is that plebeians don't have the confidence often in their own experience. And so they need help creating this space that you're talking about.
That's why they need the community.
They need the community.
Right.
And the space that's provided for them are, as you've said, often setups. Like the public speaking 3 minutes you get at city council, which is the heuristic of Q&A.
He runs those meetings and you get 2 minutes.
You get 2 minutes of mine.
You get 2 minutes.
And the bell goes off.
The bell goes off. The council doesn't respond. They just let you talk. They don't treat you as if you said anything important. And then they just, you talk like you're talking to your therapist. It's not responding. And then they just sort of let it go, and then, then they say thank you for your input, and then you go back really pissed, right? Madder than if you hadn't said anything at all. And so,
well, I think part of what you're angry at is your collusion by accepting that structure.
Yeah, and even if you yell at them, you're just proving how tolerant they are.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Totally true.
I always think of those moments as letting people shout out their complaints like wounded goats. That's beautiful, Larry. Thank you.
Larry, maybe you could help me on this plebeian framing. I still somehow or other I'm liking what you're saying about trying to get to the common values, but by calling it plebeian, it still somehow or other feels like it's versus the patrician. Or, the example you just gave about the community member versus the elected. So I'm struggling, and is there some other way to come at it where we get to the community members so that you're right, the plebeian, the lesser heard voices sometimes need help to create the container, to build the confidence, to come forward. But is it possible that conversation without being against the elite, but instead for them to name and claim something that can attract some of the resources so that we could do it together? So it doesn't have to be against. It's attracting, it's creating a new story that we could all be a part of.
This is that question-answer heuristic, right?
Exactly. Tell us, Larry.
Yeah.
Is there some other way we could talk about this rather than one person? That's the problem. Is that I think the us against them is kind of built into the plebeian circumstance, and if the plebeians could all have microphones at the city council meeting or something, but that's not something that they would necessarily think of or argue for. I don't know. I mean, I'm honestly puzzled by this.
I think it's a little bit like that's a both-and argument. So I'm coming to the conclusion that part of the royal protocol is the both-and conversation, which means we never dramatize or really see things as clearly on both sides.
The people in power can see both sides. The people out of power can't.
Beautiful.
Right?
Right. What? That's an interesting thought.
No, that's how they view. That's how they view. When I talk to my administrator, he says, I was a teacher. I know what you're going through. But you don't understand what I'm going through because I'm in charge of all these teachers.
Are you saying they claim?
Yes,
they claim. They claim superior knowledge.
They claim, yeah. They claim that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the conversation. It's not even an argument. And where I love what you said because it's a tough question. So I don't want to fight the aristocrats. Mostly it's like the Dalai Lama who says, "You mad at the Chinese?" He says, "No, there's too many of them." So I don't want to present myself as arguing as if the people in the elite are the problem or need to be argued with. And when I say you don't go to a boardroom to be surprised, well, you go there for a lot of other good things. So what we're doing here is creating the alternative to that. Now, it sounds as if you're arguing against, but at some point you've got to say there is a social and human cost to the royal protocols. And I like the word protocol because it doesn't blame any leader. It says this is something we have collectively agreed as to how we're going to function together.
Yeah.
So when you go to a conference that's organized in the old way, we're all agreeing to go there. And I listen to the PowerPoint and I ask my questions and wait for the breaks and find somebody interesting to... So that's how you come to terms with the reality that to set up a fight with, but to blur and think that the people, that the superintendent of the state legislature will invent plebeian protocols for a classroom, I think is foolishness. And that's why I like Angelos' story. You want the forest? Put your life on the line. Let's not talk about prison sentences under certain conditions based on how wrong you are. And so there's something of so anyway. Now I think we should. Anyway, thanks, Susan. Want to say something?
Hi. I actually feel really embarrassed about asking this, but I realized from last year's theme that I really shouldn't be. What does plebeian mean? I would really like that definition because I'm over here really trying to understand and like comprehend what you're saying, and I just can't. Okay, thank you.
Well, I think Webster's definition of a plebeian would be common people. And so common people are sometimes contrasted to the aristocracy or an elite. Karl Marx used plebeians in a famous phrase where he said that plebeians or the common people possessed what was it? Ignorant perfection. Yeah, that was the title of my book.
Ignorant perfection of ordinary people.
Ignorant perfection of ordinary people. That ordinary people understood injustice. They intuitively knew when they were getting screwed. But they were imperfect as to their knowledge of what to do about it. And that Marx...
I'll say that again.
Common people were perfect in their understanding of injustice, but imperfect in their understanding of what to do about it. And so Marx thought that Marxism would be the solution to the ignorant perfection of ordinary people by providing this elite who could interpret history to empower the people. But now we know through history that that created its own elitist colonialization of the people. And so what Marx called ignorant was really maybe a higher religious traditional wisdom that couldn't be appropriated by Marxism. And that is what we saw in Gandhi, and that's what we saw in Lech Walesa, and that's what we saw in Solzhenitsyn. An articulation of the wisdom of the plebeian mentality that didn't try to systemize itself into an ideology of either the left or the right, either or modern fascism or modern Marxism.
Beautiful, Larry. Thank you, Susan, for starting this part of the conversation.